So we are live. I'm here with Brett. Brett, how you doing?
Doing good. Thanks for having me, David.
Yeah, thanks for coming back. I'm going to post your first interview on my YouTube and everywhere, but I might have to edit it first because we did talk about some controversial stuff that first time back in August. I think it was in August, right?
hmm Yep.
But glad to have you back. And we've been chit-chatting just a tiny bit on Twitter about bones and dinosaurs, dragons, and I
hmm
think you've got some interesting stuff to talk about. So I'll let you take the reins, and then we'll just discuss from there.
Yeah. So shall we start with the dragons then?
Sure, why not?
Yeah. Okay. So growing up, I was super into dinosaurs. Like that was like my obsession, basically.
Uh-huh.
All throughout childhood, and as I got older, I got interested in different things too. And but it was actually dinosaurs that got me interested into the Bible, into theology, and how I ended up getting my theology degree and everything. Yeah, because of Genesis and creation and all that, and how dinosaurs connected with that. That's kind of how I got started in that. But in recent years, especially after reading uh, James Jordan and also reading works by I don't know if you ever heard of Sarah from Hamilton.
Yeah.
Er, yeah, some blog posts of his, as well as there was also that video I sent you that I had seen before about dragons, and yeah, it's really kind of brought a whole new perspective to how I view the dinosaurs overall. So we we can, and not just dinosaurs, but even other animals in general that would kind of fall under the grouping of dragons, which I would also include even certain modern animals like snakes and crocodilians in that category as well. Uh, so to begin, could start with Genesis chapter 1, verse 20. Most most translations will say something like great sea monsters or great sea creatures, or some even say great whales, which all due respect to the great doctor of the church, St. Jerome, who was the originator of the translation of great whales. I think he got that one incorrect. Because biblically speaking, I think whales kind of fall under fish. If assuming that the great fish that swallowed Jonah was a whale, which I think that's a safe assumption to make. But the Hebrew word is tanin, which generally translate to like great serpentine creatures or dragons, all throughout the rest of the Old Testament. So this group, what's interesting about them, to start off with, is first of all he uses the Hebrew word in front of them, bara, meaning create, and the text kind of implies that that was creation ex nihilo, out of nothing, whereas a lot of the other things were made, and the text implies that they were formed out of, like, say, dust or water. There's only three times that God creates ex nihilo, at least if you interpret the Hebrew in that way. There's heavens and the earth, the great monsters, and the human soul. At least I think that's referring to the human soul, and then the human body was formed from the dust. So it's interesting that of all the animals, here's this one group that's made directly ex nihilo, which indicates they kind of a special place in creation. And then, and this was something that Jordan points out, that I was like, wow. So when God gives man dominion over all the animals, it says fish of the sea, birds of the air, livestock, creeping thing, beasts of the earth. The great monsters or dragons are left out. So implies that man was not given dominion over them at first. And even Job seems to support that. Like when talking about Leviathan, God says, "Who can hook his nostrils?" And he says, "No sword or spear or anything can pierce his armor and all that." So it implies that man has no ability overall to subdue these things. At
What
least
about
by and
Saint
large.
George the Dragon Slayer? Is only by a supernatural aid that he can slay the dragons?
Uh, yeah. So it seems. In fact, that was something that the video I showed you, sent to you, kind of goes into that. It implies there's an implication that so just as the Gentiles were originally left out of God's covenant, but then with the coming of our Lord, they were brought into it. So it seems that man, while initially not given dominion over the monsters, just like Israel did not have dominion over the Gentile nations, then with the coming of our Lord, that dominion seems to have been given to man finally, to where we could subdue these things. Hence,
Ah,
some of these
okay.
stories.
Okay, okay, okay. Well, I think I correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the Jews were supposed to be the priesthood to the whole world, and it's only because they were a stiff-necked and rebellious people that God reduced the range of their authority, and it was supposed to be all of the Jews that were the priesthood. Then it got reduced to smaller and smaller categories until it's just the ancestors of the descendants of Aaron, if I'm not mistaken. So there was like an adjustment made
Mhm.
by God in that domain. But I think the initial idea was supposed to be the Jews would be the priesthood to the non-Jews. Is that something you've heard before?
Yeah, yeah, true. They were supposed to be, intermediaries between God and all the nations around them. But even with that, they still didn't have they had no ability to subdue Babylon or Egypt or
Right,
any of these other nations
right, right, right,
militarily. Uh,
right, right, right.
they're this tiny kingdom.
Oh, wow. It's off topic, but I'd like you to just talk a tiny bit about Melchizedek. How does he fit into the priesthood of the Jews? Do you have any idea about that?
Well, actually, I forget who it was who went into this. My I don't know if it was Gideon Lazar or Sarah from Hamilton or whoever it was. They, but it was actually from Melchizedek. That's where Abraham got his priesthood. Uh, so the priesthood passes from Melchizedek to Abraham, and then to Isaac, then to Jacob, to Levi. Uh,
Okay, okay.
so it really is the superior priesthood, as told in the book of Hebrews, because the Levitical priesthood is basically a subset of the Melchizedek priesthood, and Christ is of that priesthood.
And it was a better priesthood, right? It was a better priesthood,
Yeah.
more pure,
Hmm.
more sovereign.
Yep.
Fascinating. So yeah, it's another example of devolution instead of evolution. Things are falling apart since the fall, right?
Hmm. Yeah, and one thing on that note, I've been learning just how much the fall has like. Obviously, there are some things that we know, like the natural world was affected by the fall, like predation and stuff. But I've been reflecting upon the categories of animals, and like how did the fall affect our relationship with each of them. Like it actually one occurred to me just like a couple of weeks ago that I never thought of. Like I've always wondered why it is that people look at disgust with like spiders, insects, rodents, and all the rest. And then I was just thinking about it a couple of weeks ago, and then it dawned on me: these creatures are creeping things, ground creepers, and the ground was cursed. So it's like a wonder,
Uh-huh.
and it also affected our relationship with the dragons as well. Now, I don't know exactly what it would have looked like to not have dominion over them pre-fall. Like, what would that have looked like? But obviously, post-fall, that relationship turned to one of fear and like, okay, we need to keep away from these things. That goes from everything from like, obviously the big predatory dinosaurs and other dragons. Like, they obviously want to keep away from them, but even like snakes, like those are just little things slithering on the ground. Yet there seems to be a fear of them that is different from anything else. And it's interesting too that I figure that snakes are dragons based on two things. First of all, if you look at the Levitical, clean and unclean animals, both snakes and crocodilians, although some translations include crocodilians, but I think the better translation is monitor lizards in that context. But they're left out of the creeping things, like unclean creeping things. But then also in the Exodus, when Aaron's staff turns into a serpent, the Hebrew word used is tanin.
Mm,
So,
mm,
and I think I think there's a reason why that is, because it might have been God saying to Israel, like, you don't have dominion over this great monster that is Pharaoh in Egypt, but I do. And
yeah.
another reason why I think crocodiles are probably in that category as well is because I don't remember what chapter it is, but in Ezekiel it talks about it compares Pharaoh to a river monster, the Nile River monster, and that sounds to me like the Nile crocodile.
Mm, yeah.
So
What about Satan? Was he a dragon or a snake or a lizard or
I think I think those creatures are symbolic of Satan, and but I don't think that they're literal. I think it was Satan in the garden himself, and that Scripture just uses is the imagery of the serpent to
okay.
tell.
He didn't take on any form.
I mean, he could have. It's possible. I'm open to that interpretation.
Okay.
I just
It might have just been if we saw a photograph or a video of the scene, it might have just been Adam and Eve, and we couldn't see
yeah,
Satan because he's pure spirit. That's how you see it.
could be. Yeah. Uh, but by the way, interesting point on that. It says the serpent was the most
Subtle.
clever of all the creatures of the earth. Well, something interesting recently about like some of these extinct dragons, dinosaurs. Like first of all, as far as snakes and crocodiles go, we're finding out they're more intelligent than we've actually given them credit for before. But recently, it's been found that Tyrannosaurus Rex was as intelligent as a chimpanzee. Like
How do they determine that?
uh, CAT scans on the brain cavity, seeing like how it would have functioned.
Really? Wow.
Yeah, it's fascinating stuff.
That sounds pretty advanced, some pretty advanced science to, because
Mhm.
there shouldn't be any soft tissue left after all these millions of years or whatever.
You would think, but yet they keep on finding more, and not even going past like dinosaurs. Some of these old, supposedly older forms from like the Permian, they found soft tissue in them. So now not only do you have to go like, oh, these things that are 65 million plus years old, they have soft tissue. Well, now we have things that are 250 million plus years old, allegedly, that
Wow.
have the soft tissue.
Some big problems for them in the they like to boast about their natural science, but they've got some big problems.
Yeah, but I think it's great that they're looking into the things they are like. Go ahead, pursue evolution to the ultimate conclusion. Like keep searching because I'm that confident in our position that inevitably the evidence will lead to truth.
Yeah, yeah. Seek and you shall find, right?
Yeah.
So they may be reluctant to admit it, but it's the same is true from our position. Like just as Christians, if they found allegedly the tomb or the burial site of Jesus and found these bones and said there's scientific proof or evidence at least that they're the bones of Jesus of Nazareth who was crucified, we would fight against that tooth and nail, and it would take a lot to convince us that our faith
Yeah, like
was false.
okay, even if the tomb said Jesus of Nazareth, like okay, which Jesus of Nazareth? Like I'm sure there were probably at least 100 of them.
Yeah. Yeah. So my point here is like both sides are going to fight tooth and nail before accepting the
Hmm.
evidence. That's why evidence-based knowledge is not the best approach. The best approach is to know who and what God is and to submit to the church that God took the trouble to build when he came to earth, right? Like that's the best approach. So you have the dogmas, we have the teachings of the church, and we can't go wrong. And so in the modern church, a lot of modern prelates and those in the hierarchy have started to become worldly, and they've always been worldly, but there've always been worldly people in the hierarchy. But in the past, since Darwin, it's been a disaster where a lot of the priests, bishops, and popes have seemed to be giving too much respect to the natural sciences, and I find that sad. And it might not be, I'm not condemning anyone's heart, but
Mhm.
it might just be we have to pick our battles. I'm not going to fight that battle. I'm going to fight a more important, urgent matter. So I'm not going to
Yeah.
fight all the, this wave, this cultural wave of secular science. I'm not going to fight that as pope or bishop or priest.
Yeah.
And, I'm not that invested in it, and I'm just going to go along to get along. But
That
after a couple
yeah.
hundred years of that, it gets pretty entrenched.
That and also if you're someone that like isn't well versed in like the sciences at
Yeah,
all, you don't want to put your boys out there and then be made to look like a fool in the eyes of anyone of goodwill who might be convinced otherwise if they had listened to someone who does know what they're talking about, but then they listen to like say Kent Oven for example, and they hear some of that stuff and be like, these people are crazy. I want nothing to do with this.
So what are the weak points of Kent Hovind? Because I find him entertaining. He's got a funny character, but I
Yeah, he's
don't.
entertaining, all right.
What is it? What are the some of the black marks on his record when it comes to the natural sciences? Because I've been warned against him by Byzantine Scotus,
Hmm.
and I've heard other people badmouth the quality of the scientific work that he does. I mean, he's not a trained scientist anyway, but
Yeah.
what are some of the black marks on his record? Because I don't really know the corpus
Well,
of his work.
probably the biggest red flag with me, and this is always been a red flag with me. The fact that his PhD comes from what's called a degree mill,
Okay.
where basically you do a little bit of work and you turn something in, something really really bad it could be potentially, and after a few weeks you get your PhD. And most people who do that, they're not looking to actually try and expand the knowledge or wisdom of humanity. They're just looking to be like, hey, look, I have this degree, you should all listen to me. So that's always been a red flag with me
For
for
sure.
anyone,
For
Kent Hovind or
sure.
otherwise. But and just some of his arguments, I like his flood model where an ice meteor crashes into the earth and freezes woolly mammoths standing up and starts a chain reaction and causes the flood. Like this all sounded kind of out there. And plus, I don't know if you saw this a couple of interviews done with the ex-wives of Handover. Like, there's another flag right
Oh.
there: ex-wives uh, being married multiple times. And but inspiring philosophy did an interview with two of them, and then Paleologos. I don't know if you're familiar with him. He's a young Earth creation scientist. I highly recommend checking his videos out. But he did an interview with one of them, and just some of the stuff coming out of there, like he kind of thinks he's above the other people. Like he thinks of himself as almost like a new Moses. It sounds like, at least based on how they were describing it, it sounds almost that way.
Yeah, but everything you've said, other than, his speculation about how the flood might have come about, everything you said was sort of irrelevant to my question. I'm asking about like the hard science that he gets wrong. We can all speculate about how the
Yeah,
flood came about. I think it's pretty clear.
yeah,
I think it's pretty clear in the scripture that it came from the waters from underneath, from inside the planet, right? The springs that welled up and stuff. Isn't that how
yeah.
was not the major source. So whatever, like if he wants to speculate about, he's free to speculate
Mhm.
just like everyone
Of
else
course, yeah,
speculates, right? But I mean, we don't need to dwell on this, but I mean, to attack his character or whatever might be meaningful to, because as Christians we're supposed to walk in the faith and to be to
hmm,
to strive for virtue.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, I don't know. It's probably more his abrasive character and his some flaws in his character
yeah,
more than the actual natural science that he's doing. I don't know, but I mean, then again, the to endeavor to come up with a theory or a hypothesis about the distant past using natural science, it's always going to be flaky no matter which side you're on. Now, you mentioned a few names that you respect in the field of young Earth creationism. And so maybe you have more respect for a whole bunch of people in terms of the work that they're doing in the natural sciences. I know there's a lot of work being done. It just bores me silly looking at it. But even even they admit that it's a lot of speculation and that they could be wrong and that they probably are wrong about a lot of stuff, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, there's always a little bit of speculation, and whenever you're doing natural science, always at least some. If you're dealing with something that you're not totally like known on, well, or what I mean is, if
It's not your
if you
wheelhouse.
yeah, or not even just that, like if you're if you don't know the answer to a question that you're seeking out to, on some level, you're doing some speculation, even like like what like just a simple one, what's going to happen, that classic experiment of like, oh, when the moths are in the that are turned darker because of the
Pollution.
you know pollution, you could do that experiment, not know, and like, okay, I speculate that these moths are going to turn darker, but you don't know until you've actually seen it, like, you know,
Yeah, I
so
don't
on.
know. I think we've seen this sort of I think we've seen I think it's conclusive, like we have seen that if you aren't as well camouflaged, you're more likely to be eaten by the predators, by your predators,
Yeah,
and therefore the other ones will have
yeah,
a more chance to reproduce. That's basic common sense. No one is arguing against that sort
yeah.
of thing, right?
Yeah, I just brought it up as an example of like, until kind of see
Do
in
it and
front of
see
you. It
it.
on some there's it's I mean, yeah, maybe it's not the best example, but I'm just to point out that like
Yeah,
on some level, if you don't have the answer in front of you already, if you're
exactly.
going into the natural world trying to find an answer, on some level you're doing some speculation because you want to have an answer in your mind, and then sometimes you might turn out to be wrong, and like, oh, like it turns out to be something totally different.
Yeah.
Like,
What I find interesting about the natural sciences, especially with cosmology, is
mhm,
we can so easily hide because it's such a complex, large, complex question. And
mhm.
things like star formation, I think that's a
Yeah.
difficulty for the secular
Yeah,
scientists,
now
right?
we're getting into some real speculation there.
What's the
Like,
best theory they have for star formation? Because I mean, I don't know. I don't know what the best secular theory is for that, but
yeah, I don't know either because most of that stuff goes over my head.
okay.
I'm more interested in things that are either currently living or at least were once living. Like animals, fossils, that sort of thing.
Yeah,
Stars and stuff. I mean, yeah, they're pretty to look at in the planetarium, but if you're trying to break down the physics and stuff, to me, it's like,
abstract. Well, it's pretty remote subject matter for sure.
yeah,
What was that? What was the image that you shared with me? Was that a tooth? I can't remember. You shared a
yeah.
big image with
That
me.
was a I actually just bought that on Monday. That's my most recent addition to my fossil collection. It's a
You could
woolly
show
mammoth.
us. You could show us if you want.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I got all my fossils to my left here. See, where did I? There you are. Oh, yeah. This is a whole woolly
Wow.
mammoth tooth
Wow.
found in the North Sea.
Is it real or is it a reproduction?
It's real.
It's real.
Yeah.
Wow. Well, how much do you have to pay for something like that?
Oh, this was like
That's
$150.
cheap.
Yeah, especially since like some fossil dealers that I typically look at online and I have bought from for this same exact tooth would probably be like $800 on there.
Well, yeah. Well, yeah, I would imagine.
Yeah,
Amazing. It looks like a roast beef or something. Like it's like
it kind of does.
some meat that's been roasted for a long time. How heavy is it?
Yeah,
It doesn't look too heavy.
uh, it's not
Five
too bad.
pounds, 10
Yeah, probably
pounds.
about 5 pounds. Yeah, but the crown jewel of this collection here. Let's see here. Is this right here? This is a dinosaur egg.
Oh, okay. I'm looking at it on my screen here. Wow.
Yeah, yeah,
Dinosaur egg.
yep. Mm,
Crazy. If you
yeah.
opened it up, what would you find inside?
Uh, Minerals. I mean, yeah, I mean, maybe there's an embryo in there. I don't, but it would be long dead, of
Isn't there a
course.
movie about that where they accidentally rehatched the life or something?
You mean Jurassic Park?
Yeah, I've never seen
Yeah.
it.
Really? You should check it out sometime. It's a classic.
Is it good? Is
Oh yeah. I would stay away from Jurassic World though.
that a movie?
Terrible.
Is that another movie?
It's 3 movies.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah, like and the last one was kind of ridiculous because they so one of the lead characters in that is Chris Pratt, and there's a scene in the third Jurassic World movie where he's chasing after these Parasaurolophus, some of the duck-billed dinosaurs with a long crest behind, and he's chasing it down with a rope on a horse, and he manages to rope the thing like that 8-ton monster wanted to just drag him and the horse along for the ride.
The magic rope is a magic lasso.
Well, my theory is that Chris Pratt in those movies is secretly Superman, hence why he's able to do things like that. And when he survives pyroclastic flow in a volcanic eruption in the second one, where the temperature inside is like 800 degrees Fahrenheit.
Wow. Suspension of disbelief. I think that's the term.
Yeah, you can only suspend it so far, though.
Ah, it's hilarious. You know, we're so proud. We humans are so proud. We want to present ourselves as intelligent, and we know this and we know that, and we're pretty sure we understand this and that, and human health is another issue. It's just like, you really think
Yeah.
you understand how my digestive tract works? Are you sure about that?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, someone posted something on Twitter the other day. I didn't get a good look at it, but it was something new from like health scientists or something, and supposedly they're saying now that what's it like cereal, certain cereal, it was Lucky Charms, I think, or something, is actually healthier than like a steak. Like, I mean, don't quote me on that. That was just something
Uh,
I saw on Twitter, but it wouldn't surprise me.
oh yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's when you can't see the forest for the trees. So you've
Hmm.
got your dumb analysis that you've done as part of your
Yeah.
grandiose theory, and you've zoomed in and you just obsessed over some detail and these minerals or nutrients or whatever, and you make your dumb conclusion without stepping back and using common sense and saying, well, what am I saying here? Okay,
Hmm.
is it possible that this sugary crap is better than a wholesome, food that's close to the source? I mean, you can't get much closer to the source than like a chunk of meat, right? It's like,
Yeah. Uh, yep. And by the way, going back to speculation, I have a little bit of speculation here. A hypothesis I've kind of had been developing for a while, but I'm not quite in the place to prove it as of yet. But I think I might have an idea of where, after the flood, the dinosaurs and some of the others might have actually gone.
okay,
Because and what it comes down to is what was the biogeography like during the ice age. That's the big key thing. So most of the Earth, so when flood happens, all the forests have been knocked away, and it's going to take a while for them to grow back. And most of the Earth, for a while, is covered in basically treeless grassland, and that's the dominant environment. And for a while, and the fauna that comes to dominate most of the other time are the animals that can live off of grass or are fast enough to run down big grazing animals. So, like, big herbivores tend to be like elephants, horses, bison, and you know, saiga antelope. All those woolly rhinos, all that sort of thing. And then the big predators tend to be, the dogs, the bears, and especially the big cats. which I think is in God's providence because the lion is symbolic of Christ. So I think He allowed for that for cats to become the apex predators over basically the entire earth.
Oh.
And even in America, by the way, they actually had lions. American lion was actually a lot bigger than the African lion. It's crazy, but uh, but there was one part of the world where tropical forests did seem to grow back quickly, and it wasn't the Congo in Africa. That was almost non-existent for a while, or even the Amazon was much more fragmented. But in Southeast Asia and in New Guinea and northern Australia, it was extensive rainforest, and and uh, and also there was a lot more land back then because the sea levels were lower. So a lot of the Indonesian islands were connected to mainland Asia. It was called Sunda land, and then the island of New Guinea, as well as some other islands, were connected to mainland Australia, and that landmass is called Sahul. So you had a lot more land and a lot of tropical forest, and the plants there are right for them. They're prehistoric-ish,
Mm-hmm.
and also there's a lot of animal kinds there that are not found anywhere else on the earth. Obviously, there's Australian marsupials and whatnot, but even going past that, there's the tuatara of New Zealand, which is looks like a lizard, but it's actually not. And this family used to be widespread throughout the earth, but now it's only found in New Zealand. Then there's also gibbons, orangutans, tree shrews, and even in there's various birds that are unique to this part of the world. Even flying ones, if you can believe that, ones that could fly wherever they wanted, but they're only found here. And even in the sea, there's many holdouts that seem to be kind of prehistoric-ish, like the coelacanth, for example, is exclusive to the Indo-Pacific seas, and three of the four horseshoe crab species that are living today are found there, and so many fish species are uniquely found. This there, it's called the at the heart of it is called the coral triangle, which has more animals that are native to there than at least in ocean wise than anywhere else on Earth, even more than like found in the Amazon. They think there's a lot more species that are not found there. So, and what I think this part of the world is the area that probably recovered the most quickly from the flood and is probably most analogous to what the ancient world before the flood was like. And I think this was a refuge that God provided for certain animal kinds that were not able to survive elsewhere. And I think some of those creatures could have possibly included dinosaurs and some of these other dragon type creatures. In fact, even some of the stories, there's a story of Alexander the Great. I don't know how true this is, but supposedly his army went by a cave that was home to dragon, and this was in India. Then Marco Polo has his stories about seeing a dragon, and that was in China. And then there's that image from the Cambodian temple that looks like a stegosaurus.
Mm.
So it's like, okay, maybe this part of the world could have been a holdout for some of these things. And so I think the most likely place try and find if there are any dinosaurs or any other quote unquote prehistoric creatures that are still out there, they're probably in New Guinea, which is the world's second largest island and one place to explore. Like this place is so fragmented, David. There's literally over 1,000 languages, unique languages on this
Wow.
island, this entire island.
Wow.
like that's more languages than most continents.
Yeah. Wow. What about Loch Ness in Scotland?
I don't think so because first of all, if I might be mistaken, but I think that lake was formed by glaciers, so that lake was not there. I'm pretty sure at the end of the flood, it was formed by glaciers carving it out. I'm pretty sure.
It's just a legend. It's just a colorful legend that cropped up.
Yeah, and if there was a plesiosaur type thing living in Loch Ness, they have to come up for air sooner or later. So you would think that we would have spotted them.
Yeah. I had no particular attachment to that legend. I just thought
Yeah,
it was colorful. Thought I'd mention it. But
yeah,
you mentioned prehistory and the Ice Age and all that sort of thing. I don't really like the term prehistory because I think
Yeah, hence
Genesis.
my air quotes.
Ah, okay, okay. Because I think
Yeah.
Genesis starts history in the beginning and then all
Hmm.
the way
It does.
up to Revelation at
Yeah,
the end, and so it's all part of history. But there
it
are
is.
dark periods, obviously, where we don't have access
Yeah,
to information, right?
yeah, and I think for those areas, I mean, maybe there's a better term, but prehistoric can sometimes be useful in the sense that it's before written records.
Right.
You know,
So
like we don't know the history of the Australian Aboriginal people, for example, up to the time of the Europeans coming there. Like we know
yeah,
nothing of that. So in that
yeah,
sense, you could say it's prehistoric.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Or an ahistoric period or whatever. Yeah.
Yeah,
What about the writing? Is it cuneiform or Sumerian, or what's the earliest writing that people think that we have?
cuneiform is supposed to be the earliest writing that we have, and that's the writing of the Sumerians.
On clay tablets when it's soft and
Yeah.
then it hardens.
Hmm. Yep.
Is anyone still using that, or is that dead language?
That is very much a dead language. It's been pre- it got I think it got replaced with Greek pretty quickly and Syriac, and then more recently Arabic and Turkish.
Ah, okay,
Yeah.
interesting. I've got a book here. I'm gonna pull it up. Just give me 1 second. I'm gonna pull up my book for you.
Mhm.
Uh, I don't know if you know answer. There's I don't know who this is. There's Don Don Batten, PhD. Got Ken Ham. You know him, right? You like him?
Hmm.
You like Ken Ham?
I appreciate him, although I wasn't a big fan of his debate with Bill Nye, but for all that he's done, I do appreciate him.
Do you know Jonathan Sarfati
Yes, I do know him.
and Carl Weiland?
Yeah.
They did this little book. It's answers book.
Hmm.
I don't know if you can
Yeah.
see that, but it talks
Yeah.
about most asked questions about creation evolution.
Yeah.
So
I don't have that book, but I've seen it on Creation Ministries International. That is on
okay,
there.
do you know Dr. Andrew
Yeah.
Snelling?
Hmm.
He did a sort of colorful book that I got, which I think you would like.
Oh yes, I have that book. That Paul Garner. Yeah.
So that one's okay. Oh, the
Yeah.
foreword's by Snelling. Okay, the foreword's by
Yeah.
Snelling. The
Hmm.
illustrations are by Jean Elizabeth, and the book itself's by Paul Garner. Okay, good.
Yeah.
So there's a lot in
Yeah.
here. There's a lot of stuff to look at, and I remember reading about the coral reefs in
Hmm.
particular.
Yeah.
He talks
Yeah.
about the coral
Yeah,
reefs.
they believe, and I think this is a pretty interesting model that actually the pre-flood world there were stromatolite reefs. I think that's actually kind of a cool concept
What is
that
that?
these there are bacteria that build up these mounds, and they're only found in certain key locations today, but fossils of them are really big, and so that indicates that there was this unique ecosystem that went extinct as a result of the flood.
Well, we're watching. My wife and I like watching Survivor, but we're watching the South African series of Survivor, and in this particular season that we're watching, a couple of the guys have been removed from the show because they just got lightly scratched by some coral and the infection set in right away,
Oh,
and
yikes.
they had to leave the show. So it seems like it's got some self-defense built into it. It's a living organism, right?
Yeah, they're animals, crazy enough. But yeah, some corals you want to keep away from. Like most coral is harmless. There's even some that you can keep in aquariums and stuff, which I hope to do myself someday. I'd love to have a reef aquarium
Ah,
with like clownfish and blue tang and all that fun stuff.
yeah.
But yeah, some corals, the ocean is not always the most friendly place. Like obviously, everyone knows about sharks and stuff, but yeah, some there's some nasty things in the ocean. Jellyfish, stonefish, that they're the world's most venomous fish. And actually, I just watched a video a few weeks ago where this guy Australian guy. He he was he had this aquarium and he was going into low tide and he was picking up these stonefish and putting them into this aquarium. Like this is a fish that could kill you just if you just accidentally hit its dorsal. And so
Oh,
yeah,
wow.
like you'll be dead within the hour if you get envenomated by this thing. And he's picking them up like it's nothing.
I'm trying to find the name of this guy that I want to know if you know this guy. Um, and just give me a second. Hazen Odell, do you know him?
No,
He did a series of shows. I think it's still ongoing. My wife and I enjoy watching it. It's called Primal Survivor.
that
It's
sounds familiar.
so he's very comfortable handling poisonous frogs, poisonous snakes, and all these sorts of
Mm,
things.
mm,
Tarantulas, all these sorts of things.
yeah,
And he travels around. I don't know how fake it is or how real it is, but it seems, he's got a camera crew and all this sort of stuff. So
yeah,
obviously, they're playing up the drama a little bit of the survival aspect. But
probably.
when he reaches out and grabs these things, it's just like I would not do that. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, there's one guy I watch on YouTube. I don't know if you ever heard of Chandler's Wildlife, but and there's also some other YouTubers like this, but he's like the biggest one, and he owns at his house. He has venomous snakes and crocodilians. So he has like king cobras, rattlesnakes, black mamba, and big crocodiles. He actually got bit by one of his crocodiles that he was getting it and trying to bring it, but he had to try and find it underwater. It was a Cuban crocodile, which is a very aggressive crocodile species, and it bit him in the leg. But I mean, it was a small bite. It got better after a while, so no major damage, but still. And what's scary about this croc too is they can actually literally gallop on land. No joke. Like you can look it up on YouTube. Look up Cuban crocodiles galloping, and it's scary looking. It's like they gallop like a horse.
Wow. So this is a young looking, cool looking dude here. This Chandler guy. I'm just looking him up now.
Mhm. Yeah,
Does he
yeah.
have more courage than brains, or does he pretty much know what he's doing?
To own those animals, you have to be trained in it. Like it's the law. Like you have to spend so many hours with working with whatever venomous family. Like cobras, for example, belong to a family called Elapidae. So if you want to own cobras or black mambas or any others in that family, you have to work like 1,000 hours or something with the Elapidae family. Whereas, okay, he also has rattlesnakes, which are vipers. So you have to spend another 1,000 hours or whatever working with the viper family.
Mm, wow.
And you also have to have escape proof room and you know some bigger snakes they microchip in case of escape, and they also have a plan in place in case he ever gets bit, what's the nearest hospital, like all that stuff. So everything is all figured out, but yeah, sometimes he does some crazy things. Like once he was like, "Oh, if I get such and such many subscribers, I'll do the kiss of death where he would kiss the king cobra."
Don't do it.
Yeah.
We should
Oh,
ne- we
oh, he's
should
done it lots of times.
we should never be motivated by notoriety and fame or money or any of these stupid
Yeah.
things, you know.
True, but if you think about it in a sense, like are what they doing is that really more dangerous than what any of us do, like in our day to day life, like driving or being at our jobs? Like it's just that danger is more acceptable and it's not as
Uh,
much in our face. But this is more weird and more in your face.
Novelty, yeah, for sure, the novelty
Yeah.
of it. What's the most dangerous uh animal or plant or animal that you've been around other
Uh,
than humans?
yeah. Uh, like uh, like you mean like close up?
Yeah, like where you were in danger. What's the most danger you've been in because of an animal or a plant?
Oh, uh, haven't been interacted with too much dangerous stuff
Okay.
in particular as of yet. I suppose theoretically, when I was walking around in low tide in Zanzibar in Tanzania, I could have theoretically stepped on something because stonefish are actually found over there. But there's also women and children out there barefoot in the low tide collecting stuff for their respective like businesses and stuff. So if you think there was anything dangerous in the water, they would be aware of it, being as they're out there
Yeah.
every day. Then there was also one time it wasn't really a, I guess it wasn't really a dangerous situation at all, definitely, but it was with a potentially dangerous animal. But there was once when the circus was in my area, and
Oh.
in the my high school when I was a young kid, they brought their elephant over there, and I actually touched his trunk, or her trunk rather, female. Never work with bulls, uh, unless you're planning on breeding them. But yeah, I was touching her trunk. A lot of people were feeding her. So yeah, theoretically dangerous animal, but a captive bred one, raised one probably.
Well, yeah, the I would have to say for myself, God only knows what the most dangerous situation I've been in is, but just based on adrenaline and whatever, I would say is when I was tree planting up north in northern Canada and I ran into a moose. Have you seen how big
Ooh,
moose are?
yeah, yeah.
Do they kill people? They look like they could.
Yes, given the
You
chance.
know their history and their family tree and all that?
Yeah, they're the deer kind. Yeah, the
Oh,
largest living deer. Anyway,
ah,
during
okay.
the Ice Age, there was a deer that was larger than a moose. It's called Megalosaurus, although most people know it as the Irish elk,
Oh,
and had these
wow.
really big antlers that were like as long as a man.
What do you think of Herne the Hunter in the Robin of Sherwood, Robin Hood
Robin Hood.
mythology? Yeah, Herne the Hunter was the green man who was the spiritual father of Robin Hood in the Robin of
Really, I thought that was
Sherwood.
Fire. I thought that was Friar Tuck.
Well, there's a British BBC production called Robin of Sherwood. I recommend you check it out.
I never
And
heard of
they
it.
incorporate some of the more mystical legends in with the Robin Hood stuff.
Oh,
So
nice.
they have, I mean, I don't know what the purists would say about it about this, but I think with legends you can mix and match as long as
Yeah,
you do it respectfully, right?
yeah. I would have to check that out sometime because I didn't see the 2018. I think it was 2018 Robin Hood film, but that one looked like a total disaster. And from everything I've heard about it, it was a disaster.
Not surprising. There's a lot of disasters out there, but this series is I should look it up actually, but it's my wife's favorite television series of all time. Robin of Sherwood.
Yeah,
I think it's BBC.
just a few months ago, me and my wife we watched Merlin. That's another BBC series about
Okay.
Merlin and King Arthur.
Okay. So this was 84, 85, and 86, 1984 to
Oh,
1986. Okay. So, it's a little bit, you know, corny and camp, and there's some
yeah,
ridiculous scenes. There's some very ridiculous
I'm
scenes in
sure it's
it,
an '80s series, so of
but it's
course
good.
there is.
And the music is good. The music is
Yeah,
very good. It's Clannad. I don't know if you know Clannad's music, but it's a sort of Irish flute stuff, whatever.
yeah.
Very nice. It won a BAFTA award, apparently. I'm just reading it now.
Oh, nice.
So definitely check
Yeah.
that out. And if you said your wife likes the Merlin one, is that what you said?
Oh yeah, she liked it. She had seen it beforehand. I had never seen it before, so we sat down and watched the whole series together, and it was actually pretty good overall. I think. Yeah, I like mythology stuff, and actually I give a lot more credence to mythology than a lot of people
Yeah.
normally would. I think we have to.
Yeah. Well, I mean, just pick up a children's book of fairy tales or an adult book of poetry or
Yeah,
whatever, and or flip through a fictional TV show on Netflix, and guess what? They're incorporating reality and real
yeah.
life stuff into each and everything because you can't just create something, try to create something that has no connection with reality, and good luck with that
Oh
project.
yeah, and you know, crazy thing about that, even like science, you think of science fiction movies or shows, take Star Wars or Avatar. We just watched the new Avatar recently in theaters, and like every species in there is like
Humanoid.
basically an Earth animal just dressed up as an alien. Like there are these creatures in the new Avatar that are basically whales. Like so I don't know if you saw the first Avatar, but that one was save the trees. This one was save the whales.
Black whale lives matter, so don't forget about that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's just like people make fun of us for believing in God, but like God is creative and you're not, buddy. You are not creative. God is
Yeah.
creative, you know?
Mhm. Yeah, or if they do come up with something really quote unquote creative, it's very like outlandish and silly, like the Blob, for example.
Jabba the Hutt. Oh, congratulations on your genius
A
creativity.
worm. He's a worm. That's what he's a worm with eyes and arms.
Sounds kind of like Satan, actually.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, worms are images of hell.
Worm,
They
snake.
do use same.
I think they we refer to dragons as worms too, right? Was there a WYRM?
Wyvern, yeah,
Okay.
or wyvern.
Okay. Did you like
Yeah,
the fantasy movies, like that one where they ride around on the furry creature, greatest story ever told, or whatever it was?
I've never seen that one actually.
You should check it out. You should check it out.
Yeah, I've heard good things about it. I'm a Lord of the Rings fan.
Ah, okay, okay. So you still like you actually like the movies too?
Uh-huh. Yeah, very much
How
so.
many have there been?
There was the three Lord of the Rings movies, and then there was the Hobbit movies, which were all right. They had their flaws. The Hobbit movies did, and then there was the I haven't seen it yet, but the what I've heard is a disaster Amazon series.
Amazon TV, like Amazon what?
Yeah,
Okay.
Amazon Prime. Yeah, yeah, they made a
Oh,
Lord of the Rings series.
oh, okay, a whole series. Oh.
Yeah, just sounds bad overall.
Mm-hmm. So, when it comes to fantasy and sci-fi and all this sort of things, is evolution being tackled and creationism? Are there any Christians pushing for a creationist fantasy, or I guess it doesn't make any sense to make a fantasy story about creation, right? Because it's like,
I guess you could, but there hasn't really been much. There was a, and I recommend it. It's not the greatest work of literature I've ever read, but it's pretty fine overall. There was this trilogy that was released by Answers in Genesis that ties into the Ark Encounter theme park. The official backstory to the Ark Encounter, like trying to create a history for the theme park.
ah,
For the version of Noah that they basically present in it. But it's a fictional trilogy about the life of Noah.
ah, interesting. Have you read the Book of Enoch?
I have it. I've read part of it. Haven't gone all the way through it. I guess that's kind of my problem. I'm good at starting books. I'm not great at finishing them.
Yeah, well, maybe you could jump to the parts where they talk about Noah, because I've heard some good things about that.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so is it a big book?
No, it's actually a pretty thin book.
Okay. I could probably find it for my Kindle pretty easily.
Yeah, you probably could. I'm sure it's available for free out there.
Okay. I'll check that out. Anything to do with Noah and the flood, I'm definitely interested in that. And
Yeah.
he used to be my arch enemy when I was an atheist, when I was
Mm.
anti-Christian atheist. I hated Noah. So that's pretty interesting the way Satan works in our heart, right? When we hate the because he's basically like he's the father of us all because only eight
Yeah.
souls got into the ark, right?
Well, oh yeah. He's our forefather, our great patriarch, other than and
Adam.
then the ones before that up to Adam, of course. But as far as the last common ancestor, that would be Noah and his wife.
But did Noah's father and grandfather did they die suddenly because of the flood, or did they? What happened?
Well, Lamech clearly died before the flood based on the genealogies. But what's interesting with Methuselah is it depends on which version of the genealogies you go with, whether it's the Masoretic or Septuagint. But if you go with the Masoretic, Methuselah actually did die in the year of the flood, but it's not believed that he died in the flood itself by
Okay.
most people, even though it doesn't really say either way. But I would, given that he's the grandfather of Noah and the son of Enoch, uh, I doubt God would have allowed him to perish in that.
They were considered pretty much holy, these long-lived patriarchs.
I think the ones that are listed in the genealogy are probably all holy.
Okay. And there we can maybe make some criticisms of Noah within reason about, you know,
Yeah, I mean, he got drunk after the flood.
yeah. How do you interpret the story of his son discovering and uncovering his nakedness? What does that mean for you? Have you settled on an interpretation of that?
I'm not quite settled on an interpretation of that yet. I've heard all sorts of interesting ones, and that's one I'm kind of figuring out, I suppose.
Any
Although you should
interpretations?
listen to Timothy Flanders talk about that. He has a rather interesting one
Oh yeah, what's that?
on Meeting of Catholic.
Okay.
Yeah, basically, uncovering his mother's nakedness means he slept with his mother. Like
Yeah,
that was
uncovering Noah's nakedness meant he slept with Noah's wife.
yeah,
Yeah,
his
yeah.
mother. Yeah.
That's a common interpretation I've heard over the
Oh, is
years
it?
for sure, for sure. Yeah, I've heard that for
Yeah,
sure.
Timothy Flanders was the first one I've heard that one from.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've heard
Yeah,
that was a common one that I heard, but it doesn't really matter. We don't really need to know that to go to heaven, but
yeah.
um, we have to treat these stories with respect and the people that are in the stories with respect. But do you
Mhm.
have any theories about because there's a lot of speculation about the Greece was formed by uh, Japheth or whatever it was. Um,
Yeah.
do you have any
Oh,
hunch about these, like sort of building great civilizations? They all went in their own direction and formed great civilizations.
yeah. So Japheth, generally speaking, was father to the Europeans, which would have included the Greeks.
Okay.
And I think I think it was I think the founder of Greece, the Greek peoples. Forget which one. I used to know all these the table of nations. Haven't looked at it in a while, but I think it might have been Kittim
Okay.
or Job. I don't know if there's a Javan in there.
That's
Feel
the
like
one
there's
I've
a
heard. I think
Javan.
I've heard that one. Yeah. Javan or
Yeah,
whatever his name was.
yeah.
That's the one
But
that I
one of
seem to
those
remember
guys.
that he was considered one of the founders of Greece for sure.
Yeah, and of course, the Greek people themselves. There's been many different peoples coming and going, and they're like the Greeks today aren't
Yeah.
necessarily quite the same as the Mycenaeans, for example, or the Minoans. There's been all sorts of mixing and matching over the many thousands of years.
What's your hypothesis on Atlantis? Total New Age baloney, or is something truth to Atlantis?
Well, I mean, from I don't know if Atlantis itself, as Plato described it, existed, but what I do know is that during the Ice Age, sea levels were lower, and there was a lot more exposed land than there is now. Like Florida, for example, was double the size it is now, and of course, I mentioned much of Indonesia being connected to mainland Asia, and New Guinea was connected to Australia, and the Bering Strait was non-existent. There was a land bridge between Asia and North America. So we do know that there was a lot more land back during the Ice Age, and then when the ice melted, the sea levels rose, and whatever happened to be there, coast close to the coastline, which is by the way where people usually build cities, is
Yeah.
usually close by a river or coastline. They got flooded. So regardless of whether Atlantis exists, as Plato described, existed or not, whatever there was there got flooded.
Mhm. This next question is something I ask a lot of my guests, and you don't need any expertise to answer it, but I just want to get sort of the heartfelt answer from you. You seem like a sensitive guy. Um, I'm a bit troubled by the treatment of the Aboriginal peoples by the Western conquerors, and I'm torn because I'm supposed to be cheering for Christianity to civilize the barbarians and the savages, but at the same time I don't like
Yeah.
the way that they've been treated. So what's your take on that? How can I sleep better at night, being a sort of a European male that has this, I come from Christendom and I'm cheering for Christendom as long as it's done lovingly and respectfully. I don't want
Yeah.
any abuse. I don't want any abuses on any
Sure.
level from the church.
Hmm. Well, first of all, we have to consider the fact that the Christians who brought Christianity to the Australian continent were British, therefore Protestants.
Oh,
And it seems like all the racisms that have ever come out, like the connecting thread, always seems to be Protestantism, uh,
okay.
because it seems like Protestants can't quite seem to grasp the idea of baptizing cultures or interracial marriage. Like, you go back to like the Puritans, for example, who thought that the Native Americans were people of the devil and they wanted nothing to do with them. Whereas the Catholic Spanish were trying to evangelize the Native Americans and made them equal to, native born Spanish citizens. So, like you look at the history of the Christianization of Europe, they didn't, they generally didn't violently subdue people and try and take away their identity. They baptized it and washed away all the demonic elements of their cultures and brought out what was good and oriented it towards Christ. But the Protestant, conquest of the world seems to be more of like the only culture that's compatible with Christianity is European culture, and all these, savages around the world need to basically become honorary Europeans.
Mm. It's a narrow-minded approach. So you don't have any legitimate concerns about Catholic history. I know that the popes sometimes have made apologies here in North America, and
Yeah,
I've been very uncomfortable with any apology that's offered, like with Galileo or
yeah,
with the the Aboriginals here. I'm very uncomfortable with any apology that's offered by a pope or even a
yeah.
bishop or a priest. How do you
Uh,
feel?
well, a series I would definitely recommend watching Meaning of Catholics videos on the history of like Spain and Catholicism in the New World. I think they have a pretty good series on that.
Who's the head of that?
It's Tim
Okay.
Flanders is
Okay.
the main one, but he also has like Kennedy Hall, Jeremiah
Oh,
Bannister, and a number of others on there.
ah, really? Okay,
Yeah.
okay, okay. I
Mhm.
think Kennedy Hall,
Yeah.
he's a rad trad, right?
Yeah, he's SSPX, yeah.
He's Canadian.
Uh-huh.
And I happen to like him. I happen to like his vibe and his face and everything and his voice. And so, yeah,
Mhm.
he's one of the few rad trads that I can listen to. He's a little bit, and he does some pope bashing from time to time,
Yeah.
as a lot of people do.
Yeah, one thing I appreciate about the channel that they all do together, Meaning of Catholic, is, they're like, okay, we have, these different schools of thought in Catholicism. Like you have over here, you have your Scott Hahn, Catholic Answers, conservatives, and then over here you have your SSPX trads, and we need to kind of come together and talk stuff out instead of just screeching at each other on Twitter.
Yeah. So, I interviewed Jeremiah Bannister years ago, like in
Yeah,
2017 or something like that. And he's an interesting character with his presuppositionalism and all that. I can't remember if I asked you about
you
presuppositionalism.
did, you did. Yeah, I can definitely understand the reasoning behind going along with that. It's definitely very tempting, but I'm not comfortable with you know falling back onto circular reasoning as much as I can avoid it.
Right, 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 right. Another big name who's getting popular, who used to be a rad trad, is Michael Lofton. I'm interviewing him on Tuesday.
Yeah, yeah, I saw that you
So
were on
I'm
Twitter.
very
Yeah,
pumped up and excited. I watched a little something today talking about he had a guest, David Gordon. I don't know if that's Tim, any relation to Tim Gordon.
yes, his brother. Yeah,
Oh yeah, oh, it looks like him. But
yeah,
the idea was they were playing with was should we scrap the TLM and just let everyone settle their differences with one united liturgy or whatever. And I don't get too excited about these sorts of
yeah.
details
Well,
myself,
I don't.
but
Yeah, I don't think there should be like any one liturgy per se. I don't. I try not to get too much into like the controversy around the Norvis
yeah.
Ordo,
Yeah.
but within the wider church, you have the Latin rite, but you have the Byzantine rite, the Coptic rite, and all these others. Like, so I don't think we should try and get rid of all these other all these liturgies and be like, okay, this is the liturgy we're doing, and we're gonna have it everywhere, and you're gonna like it.
Yeah, I like diversity. Well, there's that saying from Vatican II, in essentials unity, but in non-essentials a healthy and balanced diversity, and in all things charity. So a lot of the trads don't like the charity part. you know, in all
Yeah,
things
and that's
charity.
unfortunate because that's one of the three cardinal virtues. Like that's you have to be charitable. You're going to be judged on how charitable you are.
Absolutely. So what was it like in remind me, you may have told me before, but what was the mass like in Tanzania? Is that where you brought
Yeah.
did you meet your wife there or did you meet her?
Yes. I met her there, and she's a Lutheran,
Okay. But you
but
did attend a mass in Tanzania?
yes, yeah, in the city of Dar es Salaam, there's a few Catholic churches there, including I like St. Joseph's a lot, probably because I've always felt a little bit of a connection to St. Joseph. Like I've been starting a little bit of a devotion to St. Joseph, trying to get kind of closer to him as a saint. Just as a husband and father. I think he's a good saint to kind of look to.
For sure.
But yeah, I went to mass there, and it was pretty nice. It was We went to the one in English. They have ones in Swahili as well. That's the main language in Tanzania, Swahili. There weren't really any Latin masses there that I'm aware of, unfortunately.
Hmm. Was the
They had
music
a
good? Was the singing nice?
yeah, African music in general is very superior to most of what filth we have in the Western world today. And the church music too is on the whole a lot better. Uh,
Yeah, they're gifted. They're definitely gifted in Africa with a lot of charisms, and I think music's one of them.
yeah, it's definitely a different world. They're much more celebratory than we
Yeah.
are. Like everything's kind of more of a party.
Yeah, well, even the Latinos, I went to a Spanish mass here by accident, and at St. Joseph's Oratory, actually,
Mm,
which is a huge oratory here in Montreal, built from scratch by a little saint, future saint, Brother Andre. But
mhm,
you should look into the history of St. Joseph's Oratory in Montreal. A
mm,
lot of miracles, a lot of miracles. But yeah, I accidentally went to a Latin, or not a Latin mass, but a Spanish language mass, and yeah, I thought I was in a party because the energy was high and everyone
mm,
was singing loudly and
nice. Mm,
participating, and just the energy was over the top. And I'm definitely not used to that. I'm used to a more somber, dour kind of
yeah,
atmosphere. When I'm not saying one is better than the other, but I was a little bit taken aback and a little bit,
yeah,
wondering. I was wondering if it was reverent enough, but to each his own. And I may be a little bit morose in my outlook
yeah,
on
yeah.
life.
It's
So
their
maybe
cultural background.
it's good to have a counterbalance sometimes.
Yeah, yeah, and that's why like for example, sometimes like I like listening to Latin hymns, but sometimes I'll listen to like Coptic or Greek or Armenian or some of these other. I think that's pretty healthy to do. Try and bring in these other liturgical rites.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Have you
but
been to an Orthodox liturgy?
uh, no, not as of yet. I haven't.
Okay.
There's not too many that are near me where I'm at.
Right.
Yeah, but another topic that I did want to
Yep.
get into as well that I had mentioned to you was what I call effeminate academia versus masculine scholarship,
Ah.
and
You're gonna
yeah,
offend a lot of people here. Go for it.
yeah. Well, so the reason why, so you know, I went to Bible school, and which is a great conservative school, but in the some of the students you get more liberalism and stuff, and I did kind of fall into that. So I guess I'm in kind of an interesting position to be talking about because in a way I kind of fell into the whole effeminate academia thing a while ago, where it's basically about being in the club, and saying the right things, and part of the reason why I care about talking about this is because I don't want people to try and go into the other extreme, which is just turning off your brain and being like, oh, books are for nerds, and I'm just gonna be interested in going to my job at the warehouse or construction or whatever, and then I come home, bring out my beer, turn on the sports game, and talk with my friends about cars and girls, and that's basically my entire existence. Like that's a picture of masculinity that I think a lot of men tend to fall into. The ones that do care about masculinity anyway. So I want to show like,
That's
no,
called
there's
toxic. That's called toxic masculinity by
y-
some.
yeah. So I want to say like, no, there's middle way between being just a uber nerd who might know the latest gender studies thing, and versus being just a grunt. Like, and I call that masculine scholarship, where it's like, okay, you're interested in what's true, good, and beautiful, no matter where it leads you, and that's what you care about, and you're not interested in being invited to fancy dinners or being presented awards, which is what effeminate academia really is all about. It's about the distinguished career and the award ceremonies and the fancy dinners and the presentations. The ultimate example of that is he who we probably cannot name for YouTube, a certain doctor
Okay, that
related to a certain illness.
saint. He's a saint
Yeah,
in
he's
that
like
religion.
the
He's a saint
archetype.
in that religion. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, he's the archetype
Just say the
of that.
science. He's the science. Okay.
Yeah. Uh huh. Yep. And a lot of people think it's, oh, it's just the university system. Like, okay, yeah, there's a lot of corruption in that,
You
and
know, he was
tuition's
raised
ridiculous.
Jesuit. He was educated Jesuit, right?
Really, that explains a lot. But but it's not merely just like, oh, ridiculous tuition, or I mean, it's easy to pick on gender studies, for example, but it goes beyond even that. I think it's just this overall lacking in masculinity, like that comes down to it, and people are getting trained up in careers that exist purposefully for university system,
Hmm.
and they're not learning real world things, or even like real world like scientific careers, for example, like like so what would you say if I could tell you you could get a job at NASA for like $160,000 a year, and all you have to do is all day is speculate on what alien life might be like in an ecosystem.
Is
That's
that a real thing?
astrobiology. That's astrobiology. That's a legitimate career. Yeah, like that's a thing. I looked it up.
Wow. You should apply.
Yeah, but
Kiss your self-respect goodbye.
yeah, but you know, uh, I think the way forward is not just to say, oh, university's bad. I think just the way forward is like study, but also do a thing that's in the real world, like get it, whether that's your job and whatever you do, or even in your private life, like raising livestock, for example, or gardening. Like be into books, but also be in the dirt. you know and
Absolutely.
go work out, and some of these I'm preaching to myself as much as anyone. Like I have work on myself to do, but I think a lot of people recognize, that there is a problem, but it's being like misdiagnosed in some ways. And the solution is just to, reject all, learning in some ways. That what the solution they're proposing. I'm saying like, no, don't, no, turn off your brain. Get into, you know, the great saints, read the philosophers and read, science. Obviously, use discernment and all those things, but get into it. But don't only be into that. If that
Yeah.
if
Well,
that's making any sense.
you need to do some self-examination. Every human does. You have to know
Yeah.
yourself. You have to know. You have to have a BS meter. Like, am I spouting BS right now?
Hmm.
Am I getting a high salary to preach BS? Just
Hmm.
be honest with yourself, and then sort of try to change your course in life. And the sad thing is, I guess, money and status
Yeah.
can blind us to all
Hmm.
the BS that we're pushing, right?
Yeah. And
It's
it
like
isn't patient for anyone.
we make fun of pimps and drug dealers, because shouldn't they know better and these sorts of things? But we're no better if we're just pushing big lies
Yeah.
and we seem respectable. Like I always use the example of the really wealthy, successful salesman who sells sugared water like Coca-Cola,
Yeah.
Pepsi, whatever. It's like everyone thinks that you've achieved something and you've got the sports cars and the mansions and whatever, but you're just selling drugs. It's sugar. Like I'm a drug
Yep.
addict myself with sugar. I love sugar. I'm addicted to sugar, and I like Coke. I like Coke more than Pepsi. But I try not to drink Coke and I try not to eat too much sugar because it's a drug
Yeah.
and I'm addicted to it. Okay.
Yeah. And
So
it's just unhealthy for you in general.
yeah, so why can we not see through this? Why can we not say instead of saying I'm proud of my son because he bought me a house and a country house and this and that with his Coca-Cola career, why don't we say, you know, that we're ashamed of him and that he went down the wrong path, you know, and
Yeah.
you're not going to hear the mother of a successful businessman saying that they're ashamed of their son because they sold their soul to the devil. You're never going to hear that. What you're going to hear is, my son wears these clothes, he's got this job, he's got this money, he's got this house, he's traveled here, here, and here, and here, and he knows this person and that person that's famous,
Mhm.
and so on and so forth. That's what you're
Yeah.
going to hear.
Yeah. Hear about all the, the fancy shiny stuff.
The
And
worldly
yeah.
trappings of
And
success.
that's the very image of like effeminacy in some ways there. It's, liking, you know, any basically you're addicted to pleasure, and
Mm,
you're not willing to go through any kind of suffering at all. Like you just want to stay comfortable. Like
mm,
you want to have, the comfortable lining clothes, and the fancy cars, the money, the big house. Like that's the very thing with the femininity, and that's what a lot of academia has become. It's just this, like, I'm gonna get in with this guy, and I'm gonna have a big successful career. And you know, uh, I think there's one movie that pictures it perfectly. Which I don't know if you ever heard of. Stars Matt Damon. It's Goodwill Hunting.
I've heard
You
of
ever-
it. I may have seen it, but I tend to forget films that I've seen. But
yeah, but
Goodwill
it's a
Hunting. It's
very great.
Robin Williams in that.
Yes, and it's a very great film overall. But there's a particular scene in there I think perfectly illustrates, and I love this scene. It's a bar scene where Matt Damon and his friends, Ben Affleck is one of his friends in the movie, and they're out drinking, and Ben Affleck sees these girls over by the stools, and they're having a drink over there, and he goes over there and starts flirting with them. Uh, and then this and by the way, this bar is nearby. I don't know if it's Harvard or one of these Ivy League schools. So a lot of the people that go there are students of that school. And then this guy comes up who's a college student there, like a graduate student or whatever. He comes up to him and starts trying to make Ben Affleck look like an idiot. And he comes up to him and he's like, I'm curious as to your thoughts on the development of the market economy in the southern colonies. My contention is that the economic modalities in the colonies prior to the American Revolution, especially in the southern colonies, can be most aptly be characterized as agrarian pre-capitalist. And then that's when Matt Damon steps in. His character is like a genius character, and he basically makes this college grad look like a fool who's plagiarizing stuff. And
He can identify the source material that he's drawing
yeah,
from, or what?
yep, word for word, like the book, the page. And but but you know what? And then you know, and then Matt Damon says like, "Oh, you dropped 100 grand in education that you could have gone for $1.50 in late late fee charges at the public library." And then the student is like, yeah, and maybe, but I'll still have a degree, and you'll be serving my kids fries on our way to a skiing trip. And and there it is, right there. It's all about, oh, I'm going to have lots of money so I'm gonna go and take my kids on a skiing trip to some fancy expensive resort while you're, work slaving away at like McDonald's or something. And that's really at the essence of what I call effeminate academia. It's the career. It's not the pursuit of knowledge or wisdom. It's the career.
Exactly. Yeah. I remember how naive I was when I went to university. I signed up for physics and I thought, now I'm going to delve with the greatest minds and the brightest professors into the nature of ultimate reality. And then I get to university and they're just training you for industry. That's all they're doing.
Yeah.
They're just training you for industry. And, that's fine. Industry's fine, whatever. If you're into that, I wasn't into that. I thought I was going to be learning, pursuing the truth
Yeah.
about ultimate reality. That's what I thought
Mhm.
physics was, because in my reading of philosophy, physics is the highest natural science because it's about nature. Physics means nature.
Mhm.
It's a study of nature. And so I thought I was really going to be going into a pursuit of knowledge of the ultimate reality, but that just isn't the case. So I was very naive and very disappointed, and I actually dropped out and
Mhm.
just had enough. Like I'd been there for from 92 to 95, and
Mhm.
it's a co-op program, so I was working at the same time. I got to work in a lot of different places, but I wasn't interested. I wasn't interested in the application of physics. I wanted to understand reality. So
Yeah. Yeah, and another thing too, with that scene I mentioned,
yeah,
another sign of it in that scene, the grad student, I was kind of trying to say as best as I could his word for word. I was quoting
yeah,
him.
you did a good job. I could never do that.
Yeah, and there's a reason why I do it like that, because I'm trying to, kind of showcase exactly what that looks like. The mannerisms and the wording, like, so obviously he's talking about, economies like in the, southern colonies before the American Revolution. He uses words like, uses these big, unnecessary words like, the economic modalities of the southern colonies. And then he's like, he could be most aptly characterized as agrarian pre-capitalist. Translation: they were farmers. Like, okay, there's some, areas in scholarship where you have to use, big terminology like, or not even just, in scholarship, but just, in certain subjects like, okay, we as Catholics affirm transubstantiation. That's a big term.
Yeah.
You can't, and that's a term that we have to use. You can't break it down any further than that. But when you start making up terms like agrarian pre-capitalist, when you could just say farmers, like you're just making stuff up, try and make yourself sound smarter than you actually are.
Have
And
you ever
that,
seen?
and I think that's a lot of what academia tends to be. Like I have, books around here about like, literary theory and stuff, and they're using terms like post-structuralism and, queer theory and, post colonialism theory and this and that. Like,
Have you ever
it's word
seen?
salad.
Have you
Word salad.
ever? Have you ever? I recommend that you watch all of Woody Allen's movies because they're great. But I mean, he may be some kind of sexual deviant, but his movies were
Mm,
highly entertaining. And I think he's funny. I think he got better as he went along, and then like he
mm,
peaked, and then he started going downhill again. But
mm,
Annie Hall is a classic. You should check it out, if for no other reason than the scene when they're waiting in line at the movie theater, and he's pontificating. I forget who it is that's pontificating about Marshall McLuhan. The medium is the message, and this was all hip and cool, at the time, to talk about Marshall McLuhan, who's a Canadian, by the way, talking about
mm,
his theories. And it just so happened that as he's pontificating, waxing large and all this sort of stuff, who should turn around in line but Marshall McLuhan himself? And he just
mm.
says, "You have no idea what I'm talking about. You have no idea what my
Yeah.
uh,
And then,
it's
and then
hilarious. Have you seen it? You
no,
should check it out.
yeah, at some point I might do that. But one thing that really, showed just how, it's become corrupted by this, feminine academia stuff. I don't know if you saw some years back, there were a series of bogus
Yeah,
papers put forth
yeah,
in the scientific literature
yeah.
that used the right words, but they were coming to purposefully bogus conclusions, but they were using the right words, so
Yeah,
they
yeah,
were
yeah.
being published.
That guy, one of those guys, has become very famous as
Yeah, James Lindsay.
yeah, a critic of postmodernism, a critic of this whole um, Hegelian dialectic and all these sorts of things. And
Yeah,
he does pretty thorough analysis from what I've understood.
yeah, and where it especially gets bad is in like the realm of theology and biblical studies, because like, and this is where it really relates to me, because I used to be on the side of women's pastors, and I think deep down while I was in it, I knew understood that it was bogus, that I was doing word games with the Greek, but I was so committed to the ideology that I kind of tricked myself out of it, because I was listening to some of these, great scholars, who were being like, oh, if you look at the cultural context of St. Paul, you had the Temple of Ephesus and the Temple of Artemis and the women priests, and that would have caused problems with the church and blah blah blah. Like, it's word salad, and it's like, you know, uh, re- recently, like a month or so ago, I got into a Twitter argument with a guy who put out there like, why is it that people go onto YouTube for their commentary on like religion and philosophy and politics and stuff? Like, because they're actually, you know, men who actually believe what they're following the truth, and they actually know their stuff, and they're not selling me a car. And and the university system is corrupt by effeminacy. And we kind of got into back and forth, but it's like, like some of these people like Gideon Lazar, or Christian Wagner, or Seraphim Hamilton, or Tim Gordon, you know Tim Flanders, Kenny, all these people. I'll take whatever they have to say on scripture or theology or tradition or any of these things over some guy coming from like Princeton Theological Seminary. Like, by and large, not to say that everything that comes out of the mainstream is bad. Like Scott Hahn, for example,
Yeah.
he's a mainstream scholar, but he's one of the really good ones. Like, he's a good model, I think, of like a masculine scholar. Like, he actually does. He's Even though he comes from that cesspool, uh, by and large, he came out of it. But like, he does seek after what's true, good, and beautiful. Like, and
Yeah.
I enjoy his books.
You like Peter Kraft?
I I haven't read his books, but I've heard good things about him. I've seen a little bit of him on like Matt Fradd and stuff. Like,
Okay.
yeah,
Check out his older content on his website and on YouTube. His apologetics pretty cool.
yeah,
Pretty cool stuff. What about Bart Ehrman or Ehrman?
yeah, Ehrman. I do
You
have
know his
some.
story?
Yeah, he actually, one of the schools that he went to was actually where I went to school.
Ah.
Yeah,
So did he lose his faith completely or what happened?
yes, he did. He's an agnostic, but uh, but I think in some ways he's kind of a victim of some of that, because the professors that he was engaging with his questions about the Bible, they just couldn't answer his questions, like they weren't prepared to, and they were.
Can you answer his questions? Can you answer properly?
Uh,
Because
not I forget.
it's a big topic,
Yeah, it's
the
I would have to.
I don't know if you've seen the video I did on the Bible and how we don't have the Bible here. It's I call it the mystical Bible because it's up in heaven. No one's ever seen it.
Mhm. Yeah,
And all we have here is a shadow, and it might be very, very close to the Bible, but it's not the Bible. It's like it's a
yeah,
shadow. It's a shadow of the Bible, and it doesn't pose any problem whatsoever for me because I'm Catholic. I have the living magisterium. I have God Almighty directing
yeah,
this ark, this ship. Right?
yeah, and I think that might have been his problem too, because being as he was raised Protestant, he was committed to sola scriptura, and then once that started falling apart, then
Well, how do
down
you
goes the
feel?
dominoes.
Are you like right on board with my attitude that as long as we have the Holy Spirit guiding us and protecting us in the
Oh
church,
yeah,
then we
yeah. It's like would there be a church if God never put a Bible together? And I would think yes, because Noah didn't have a Bible, Abraham didn't have a Bible, and Moses, I mean, at first he didn't have a Bible, but obviously he wrote the the first few books of the Bible. So that was when the Bible really got started, was with Moses. But we had this long faith tradition of going back to Adam.
Well, do you think that Moses had a very graphic, mystical experience where he could see the Garden of Eden, or is it just a tradition that was handed down? He just wrote it down because he believed it, or did he get to experience something mystical?
Probably both.
Okay,
Yeah.
pretty cool when you think about it, right?
Mm.
And when did Moses live relative to Adam? How many years was that roughly?
Um, Forget the math, but probably probably 3 to 4,000, maybe 4,000 years.
And how long ago is Moses now from us?
Uh, like 3,500 years.
Okay, so you think the universe is about 8,000 years old?
Probably about that. And I base that off of the Septuagint. I go more with the Septuagint than the Masoretic.
You know, the Jews think that the universe is not yet 6,000 years old, and that at 6,000 the Messiah is going to come.
Yeah, that was actually an interpretation among some of the early fathers too, like Saint Justin Martyr, for example. He kind of had that interpretation too.
Do you think it's too extreme for a Christian to adopt the less than 6,000 age of the universe?
I mean, I guess you can try and make an argument based off of some of the scriptural variants, but in terms of like the history that we do have, I think less than 6,000 is a little bit of a stretch, because then you have to, try and squeeze in there like the Ice Age and
How
the
long was the
early.
Ice Age? How many Ice Ages were there? Just one?
Just one. Yeah, I would recommend reading Mike Ollard on that. He postulates that the Ice Age was probably about 700 years.
That's pretty long.
Well, it's less than the 2 million or so years that mainstream would before. And that's just his maximal analysis. He's given like the maximum there.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So I have another interview coming up, so I got to let you go, but we have a lot more to discuss next time you
Oh
come
yeah,
on. It was a pleasure
yeah.
seeing you
Fun talking
again.
to you.
Yeah,
Yeah.
very good talking to you.
I like
All,
talking about all these things.
all the best to your wife and child. How old's your child now?
She just turned a year last month on the feast day of the Immaculate Conception, December 8th.
Ah, wow.
Yeah, which ended up working out great with her name. Her name is Manna. Just like our
Ah,
Lady carried within her womb the bread of life.
ah,
You had she's the new Ark of the Covenant, so the old Ark of the Covenant had the bread from heaven, manna. So it really worked.
wow.
Like we didn't plan for that, but it just because we came up with the name manna prior to her, like a month or so prior to her birth, but then it just happened to come out. She
Cool.
came out on December 8th.
Wow, very cool. Congratulations. And does your wife speak Swahili or what's her native dialect?
Swahili. Yeah.
Do you know
There's
what
also
mana mean? Does mana mean something in Swahili? Mana?
not I don't think so. I mean, manna, as far as I know, just means
Those
bread of life.
sounds, that sound mana. It might mean something.
Yeah,
I'd be curious to know what it means in Swahili if it means
yeah.
anything.
I'll have to ask her that sometime. She also has a tribal language that because there's different tribes in
That's the
Tanzania,
language she uses when she's angry at you?
and no, yeah, no, the tribal language she would use with her grandmother when she lived with
Ah,
her.
okay.
'Cause, it's sort of like how English is the main thing here, but then you have families of like Mexicans or Polish, and they're speaking their respective languages when they're in the house.
Of course, of course. Yeah, I'm married to a Greek and she spoke Greek and Macedonian. But
Mm.
she learned Macedonian because that's the secret language the parents would use when they didn't want the kids
Oh,
to understand. So they switched from Greek to Macedonian. So kids
yeah,
are pretty smart, right? They could pick up on stuff.
yep. Mm.
So all right, well, all the
I,
best. We'll
I hear
talk very
somebody
soon.
fussing.
What's that?
I hear somebody fussing out there.
Well, I'll let you go. You can go and take care of the family, and God bless you. Please remember me and mine in your prayers. And last time we spoke,
Yeah,
I enrolled you and your family in a perpetual mass. So you're getting those graces all
well,
every day till
thank
the
you.
end of time.
Thank you. And maybe as we close out, maybe you could say a prayer for the soul of Saint of Pope Benedict.
Yeah,
since he just passed away.
sure. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Dear God, we love you. We thank you today for all the graces, and we're sorry for our sins. And we thank you in a special way for Pope Benedict XVI. You gave us a great grace in that holy and sweet man. And we hope that Pope Francis will continue to reign as the vicar of Christ, and that we will continue to benefit from the teachings of these two great and holy men and these two popes and all the popes that came before them. And we thank you. We thank you for the church. We thank you for the papacy. We thank you for the infallibility of the church, the indefectibility of the church, and the inerrancy of Scripture and the tradition that is passed down. And we thank you for the Holy Spirit that you sent when you ascended, when your Son, Jesus Christ, ascended into heaven. He sent us the Holy Spirit to guide and protect the church. So we have so much to thank you for today and every day. And please continue to protect us and to guide us into all truth. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, Holy Spirit. Amen.
Okay. Well, thanks for having me on again.
Thank you so much. We'll talk soon on Twitter.
Yeah, we'll do.
All right, my brother. God bless you.
God bless.
Bye.
Mhm.